Hey watch friends, today we're going to be checking out a couple of the latest prototype from the micro brand Söner. This is the Nostalgia. First, I do want to apologize for my voice. I've unfortunately been under the weather, however I've got way too many in the queue, so we're going to go ahead and press forward. This one launches on Kickstarter on February 29th of 2024. As I mentioned, these are prototypes that we're checking out, and I'll explain why we have two of them as we go through the video. Despite the fact that these are prototypes, I do of course want to mention they intend to send me a production version, and I always want to be upfront about that. So with that, let's go ahead and dive straight into this and get a feel for these watches and what it's like to live with them. First, for the basic specs. This comes with a staggering 10-year warranty on that, and that's actually true for this quartz version we're looking at, but also for the automatic as well, which is really quite impressive, especially on the automatic. As far as the basic dimensions, this with being a rectangle case, I took several dimensions here because it's important and the specs are a little bit misleading as we'll look at as we go through, so don't be too turned off yet. As far as the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock position, this is coming in at 28.1 millimeters. The bezel does step down fairly considerably, and as you can see, this is kind of an integrated bezel. That's coming in again from the 3 to 9 at 24.9 millimeters, so just under 25. Measured between the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, this is coming in at 34 millimeters. But then the lug to lug does kick out to 39.9 millimeters. So in that respect, it's closer to a sort of 40. Obviously, 40 usually would have the lug extension as well. But because of the square presence, it really, I think, unlike mini round, this actually becomes essentially part of the overall silhouette of the watch itself. As far as the lugs, they are a standard strap change friendly 20 millimeters. The thickness is staggering on this. Despite the fact that this is a quartz and you would expect them to be thinner, this is only coming in at 7.2 millimeters. Now that is measured dead center here, so as you can see, this does have an arch to the actual case back, so that is, of course, going to be at the thinnest measurement. Measured from here to here, I believe that's just over 10 going from the outside lug. With it case, it's a little bit hard to get an accurate measurement, but I believe that's their stated spec. But very, very thin overall. As far as the crystal itself, as you can see here, similar to one that we looked at in the past with the Momentum, which is a much larger version of this, and I think this is much better proportioned. This again has a single dome sapphire crystal. That sapphire crystal does include inner AR coating, but being a single dome, you can see you still get that glorious distortive effect there as you move out. One of the things I like, with the smaller size, I'm not certain if it naturally has less of an actual dome to it, or if it's just because of the shorter distance, but overall this doesn't get quite as much distortion as the Momentum did, as I recall. It's been quite a while for that, but my recollection is this is actually, I think, a little better of a fitment for it in an integration there, not quite as much of a hump. As far as the movement, with this one being the quartz, it is coming with an ETA movement. Specifically, it's the 901.001. As I mentioned, it's a quartz movement. It is going through 3 ticks, I believe, per minute for that. So what that does is that actually extends out. This has a stated 11-year battery life. So despite the fact that this is a quartz, it's truly going to be grab and go for quite some time. You will not have to get in there and pop out that battery. But again, we'll talk about that further as we go through as well. As far as the water resistance, this comes standard with 50 meters or 5 atmospheres of water resistance. For the dressy styling, I think that's plenty respectable. You know, ultimately, as I've talked about many times, I usually prefer 100 meters just for peace of mind. However, on this style, I think 50 meters is very reasonable. Many would be coming in with 30, so that's not too bad. As far as the weight, on this factory included leather strap, it's coming in at 48.8 grams, so very, very light. On the wrist, it really does disappear. As we'll look at though, you do have different strap options, and they actually are now even featuring a bracelet option that's available as well. As far as the colors, this is available in 4 different colors. There's going to be the 4 different dial colors. There's the green dial that we're looking at. There's additionally the black dial that we see here today as well. There's also a white dial and a red dial, and that's all for the quartz version. There's also going to be different cases that you can get. There's the silver that comes, stainless steel, that comes in both brush as well as a polish option, and we've seen both of those here today. But then there's additionally a gold version, which is going to be brushed as well. The dials themselves, depending on which color you go with, is going to depend on which texture or finish you get. The black and white version are going to be more of a matte texture, whereas the green and the red are my personal preference, as we'll talk about, and that is a sunburst pattern. I really think they play with the light very nicely, and especially on this green, while it is not as versatile of a color as certainly the black or white would be, especially on a dress watch, it really just has that pop. It almost gives it that kind of like gem-like effect to it, the way that that hits, and I really think that that's suiting to this overall design, give you that kind of emerald presence for it. As far as the dial layout, it's a very clean overall dial layout. You're just going to have printing at the 12 o'clock position with their brand name and logo, and then down at the 6 o'clock position, you just have a single line of text. Both of those are going to be white, and that just says Nostalgia there for the namesake. As you move out to the perimeter, you'll notice that there are no hashes, so this has, I think, in typical dress watch styling, just a 5-minute as far as precision legibility, but I really don't find that to be a bad thing, and I do think for a dressy watch like this, you want to keep that cleaner overall aesthetic. As far as the handset, again, in keeping with the dress styling, I think this is well chosen. It just has a traditional Dauphine handset, and that is going to be polished, and as you'd expect with Dauphine, it's going to be pointed on both ends, and it does have that signature crease. What that crease does for you is it really gives that nice light play because of the dual faceting that you get on both sides, so that's a nice touch there as well. This, as I'm sure you can already see, does not have a second hand, which for me is extremely welcome. I would personally not even be considering a quartz watch if it had a ticking second hand on that. That's just something that's a huge pet peeve. I find it too jarring, and overall I don't enjoy that. But in this, I think it's nice grab and go, and certainly with the dress watch, I think, again, that's in keeping with the overall style. As far as the markers themselves, you have at the 12, 3, 6, and 9 traditional polished baton style markers. Those are just going to be flat, so they don't have any faceting. However, you still do get plenty of light play, in part because of that single dome crystal, as well as just the way that that light hits it and kind of the reflectivity there. So I don't find that that takes away or that it's missing the facets. As you move out, you can see that in between those, there are parallelograms. So those are going to be, again, they're skinnier for them. You can see they're kind of the angle cut, hence the parallelogram. But with that, they, again, are just going to be flat for overall the application and the polishing. And then again, as I'm sure you can see here, this does not have loom, which I do think is in keeping and plenty acceptable with the overall dress style. As far as the bezel, as we already looked at, the bezel is set back on this, but additionally though, it is an integrated style bezel, so that's milled directly into this case. It's not actually set on like a traditional fixed bezel would be. As far as the shape of it, you can see this has what I would describe as kind of a subtle H silhouette. So it runs with the lugs, but then it tucks in for that. And I think it's a neat stepped kind of Art Deco style effect there, where you get a very interesting visual with that overall presence, and I like that. I think it's a good touch. The finishing is going to match depending on which case you go with. So if you go with the polish, it's going to be polished, and if you go with the brushed, it's going to be brushed. So you're going to have that nice, clean integration there, and that's going to be true through the rest of the watch. Shifting over to the case on this is 316L stainless steel on all the variants, whether they're plated or not, so the gold version is going to be 316L as well. This does, though, have a hardened coating on that, which is nice to see. I believe it's 800 Vickers is what they're stating for that. That's always something that I personally enjoy, especially on the polished version, but we'll talk about that further as we go, because there is some trade-off with that. Personally, I will say I am partial to this brush version, which is what we're spending most of the time looking at today for good reason. This brush, as you can see, it does have a decently clean application. It's certainly not the most refined brushing that I've ever seen, but it's really not too bad there either, especially at the only $265 price point, which really isn't too bad. I do think there are ones that punch harder from certain brands, especially considering the fact that this is a quartz watch, but I don't think it's too bad either. As far as the finishing, as we already talked about, you've got the 3 finishes, so you've got brushed or polished, but then you've also got the stainless steel or gold, so you have kind of combinations thereof. The only ones that are going to be available in this brush finish are actually the green, the green version or the black version. So the green or red is available with the sunburst style, but only the green or black are available with the polished or brushed options for that. That's something I'd like to see expanded, but that's partly because I'm partial to the brushed, whereas the polished is kind of the default position. The overall case shape on this, you can see it is an arch for the overall shape. So as opposed to just having kind of downturned lugs, the whole entire case itself is curved. And that I find that works nicely on the wrist, as we'll see in the wrist footage coming up here. As you look to the overall shape, you can see that there is a nice lug drop to that, so it does contour well. I think even for larger wrist, I think it's going to have that curvature that works just fine. Additionally, though, you'll see that there is an elliptical undercut for that, so it's thicker in the middle, and then it kind of tapers out as you go to the lugs. And I think that adds some visual interest. But then additionally, as part of the lug drop, it's not just the underside. You can see the drop there is fairly smooth and static, and then it becomes kind of a compound drop as you go to the top side of the lugs there. So I think that gives a nice visual as well, and really adds something different to the overall look. As far as the silhouette, as we already saw, it is flat between the lugs. That's going to make it nice for integration for various just standard straight dressy straps. As far as the 3 o'clock side, you can see that this does not have a crown guard, which again I think is in keeping with the style. As far as the crown itself, this is coming in at 4.3 millimeters, so definitely on the smaller side, though I do think it is well proportioned for the overall case. And with being a quartz especially, this one is not particularly hard to grab a hold of. On the automatic, that might be a little bit more of a problem there. However, it is an automatic watch, and everything is larger as far as it's a little thicker and those things, so it might have a larger crown, but I can't confirm that piece. As far as the crown itself, as you'd expect, it is a push-pull construction. I believe that's true on the automatic as well. It has a traditional coin edge, which again, I think is fitting with the dress style. And then it is signed on the exterior. And that's a nice touch there too. Shifting over to the case back. The case back on this is a pretty basic construction. It is going to be a concave shape. The finishing, again, is going to match depending on which version you go with. So you're going to have either a brushed finish or a polished finish, depending on your choice for the overall case. I expect that that's going to carry over, or that should carry over for the gold as well, where that would match up for that. That would otherwise be pretty unsightly. As far as the basic text in there, you can see that it is just laser etched for that, and it is held in with screws, so not a screw in, but rather held in actually with screws. As far as the straps, as I alluded to earlier, the straps on this, so the one that we're looking at here today, is just a basic kind of slab leather construction. It is tapered from 20 millimeters at the lugs down to 18 millimeters at the clasp. I believe that's going to be true of all of the different traditional strap options. You do, though, have a variety of colors as well as textures that you are able to actually pick for that. So that's a nice touch that they're giving you the option to be able to see which one is to your personal taste. Additionally, there is a newer bracelet option, and that again will match with the case finishing is available in different ones there. I believe it's the same price point for all of those, so that's pretty good. Additionally, though, one of the other things that's nice is they actually allow you to choose for our larger wristed folks. You can choose a larger length strap, and then smaller wristed, they have a smaller option as well. So they do have two different choices. All of them, I believe, are going to feature quick release spring bars. Certainly, I can confirm that that is the case on this particular strap version. Additionally, they do come with unsigned buckles, and that too will match the finish. So polished on the polished case and brushed on the brushed case. All right, so now that we have a better feel for what this watch is actually like to live with as far as the basic specs, let's go ahead and take a look at some comps. All right, so here it is next to the Zelos Nova, and this gives you an idea. This is around a 38 millimeter watch, but a traditional round look. You know, depending on what you're looking at, the overall physical presence I don't think is significantly smaller, and I think this wears great on my 6.5-inch wrist, actually for both of these, but you can tell it is just very visually different. This to me, I think, in keeping with kind of that tank styling for the shape, I think is well suited and well proportioned. One of my complaints with the Momentum was that it was just too large, so unless you have a very large wrist, it's probably going to be a better choice for most people. Here it is next to the smaller version of the Revolot Universal. Again, just giving you an idea, a little closer in scale here, and you can see again, smaller presence still for this in many respects compared to this, which I believe is a 36 as I recall. However, you can see I think it's relatively in keeping because of that different silhouette. And then just bringing in a very large square option, at least by comparison. Here it is next to the Trafford Crossroad. This one is only, I believe, stated at 40 millimeters. However, as you can see, it's just a huge difference as far as the overall presence between those two. You know, for me, this is pushing it as far as sizing on my 6.5-inch wrist. This, especially with being a dressier style, this would be way too big for my wrist trying to pull off that dressier style. This is more casual, so it works just fine. But that gives you an idea, hopefully, there of the sizing and kind of what to expect for these. So let's go ahead and wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, some critiques, and there's some things I definitely want to touch upon, as well as the summary. First, for the positives, the pricing I think is very affordable. You had $265 for this particular version with the quartz, and then not significantly more for the automatic. I really don't think it's too bad. Certainly, there are ones that I think are as strong or stronger values, but what you're getting for the specs as far as the hardened coating, those kind of things, I think is plenty respectable. The wear is pretty excellent, especially for a dressier style watch. It actually still has, despite the small dimensions, I think it still has plenty of wrist presence, and it really gives it that dressy style and feel that I think the Momentum was missing because it was just a little bit too large. This really channels more of that kind of true vintage sizing and feel, which I think is what they're going for, especially with the namesake of nostalgia. So I really am strongly partial to this one over that prior Momentum that we looked at. the wide range of options that are available. You've got a fair amount as far as 4 different dials, but then you've got the different case options plus the strap combinations. So you really have something to kind of make it your own directly from out of the box, which I think is nice there. And then the thinness, this thing, as we talked about, is supremely thin. So that is really excellent, and I'm very pleased to see that. But what about some critiques? First, I do want to mention, I definitely had some quality control concerns with these prototypes, as that's why we actually have 2 of them here. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in this black version. As you can see, I have it off a strap. That's why that one was on the polished strap, because that actually originally came from this. This one, despite the fact that it is a prototype, and I understand these things can happen, I don't know how much is going to pick up on camera, but this one received, and it has, just specks of dust all over. It's got some scratches and issues on the actual hands themselves. And unfortunately, the reason this has a completely different time is because the watch movement itself was dead. That was definitely concerning. So prototype or not, I understand these things can happen, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least share that with you, that I did experience it. I've been assured that is not going to be the case with the production version, and I'm looking forward to receiving the production so I can actually confirm that myself, and I will be coming back here to confirm either way whether that is the case or not. One of the things, though, that cannot be, I don't believe, attributable to it, and I don't know if it'll pick up on camera or not, but there is kind of like a waviness to this polish. So despite the fact that I personally am partial to brushing in general, I just think this polish is a little bit too much, and I think it leans a little bit too dressy, despite the fact that I realize this is a dress watch. This polish is not the cleanest I've ever seen. Like, even at the price point, I've seen some that don't have that kind of waviness and distortive effect. I don't know if that's a result of the hardened coating or what. And this, I will say, does have scratches on it, so I'm not certain if this one had the hardened coating with being a prototype or not. But maybe you can see that on camera, but I can assure you in person, it isn't the cleanest. Certainly I'm not expecting Grand Seiko level, but it isn't the cleanest polish that I've ever seen. So that's something to be aware of. And then just a preference item, the black, as you can see here, while I do think it is a nice look, I would like to see if they had, ideally, the option to have either a sunburst or a matte with both the black and the white variant there. As you can see, you just don't get the same level, so certainly this is more traditional, but you don't get the same level of light play with that. So where does that leave us overall for this? Ultimately, while the automatic I do think is a nice option available, I really think this quartz is the sweet spot, especially at the price point. While I'm not necessarily, like many of you, a huge quartz guy as a general rule of thumb, I think it just works for this. It turns it into an inexpensive, affordable, grab and go, everyday kind of dress watch that you don't have to worry about beating up because you've got the scratch resistant coating and those kind of things, and it's not breaking the bank price point wise either. So personally for me, for the overall thinness, because the other one is, the automatic is going to be thicker, plus it has a date at the 3 o'clock, which I'm not as crazy about, I really think that this is the one to get for most people out there. So if this is something that you're in the market for, hopefully this has helped to give you a better idea as to what to expect. But personally, I would recommend checking out the quartz version. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If you did enjoy it, do tap that like button. If you haven't already done so, smash that subscribe button. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Which color is your favorite? Are you planning on grabbing one? Do you like the quartz or the automatic? All that kind of good stuff. Thanks for watching.